The European Union is a vassal state of US empire, even though its own interests are being decimated by taking this path. It's lunacy on steroids. I can't actually get over it. Through alternative discussions like this and through social media, people can begin to find a way of negotiating out of this madness, but it's not going to be easy, and I don't think it's going to be quick, but we have no choice but to try.
Hallo und grüezi. Clare Daly ist eine der wenigen Abgeordneten, die sich im EU-Parlament der gegenwärtigen Kriegshysterie gegen Russland entgegenstellt. Im Gespräch mit dem Politologen diesem und dem Journalisten Alexander Mercouris geht sie dem Kern der aktuellen Lage auf den Grund und erklärt, dass eine der Hauptursachen für den profitorientierten und den Bürgern zuwiderlaufenden Kriegskurs die Korrumpierung der EU durch mächtige Schlüsselindustrien ist. Der derzeitige Kurs führe in eine düstere Zukunft, so Daly. Denn während der Rest der Welt den Nerv der Zeit wahrnehme und sich von den USA loslöse, schreite die EU mit Washington in den Abgrund.
It's true that it played a certain role in terms of sort of peace in Europe, but at its essence, really, the European Union was I suppose an institution or institutions which enshrined neoliberalism at the core of European politics, and the military creep. People thought that they would be a sort of like a United States of Europe and develop that collective power. And part of that move was a move towards involvement in foreign affairs. And we saw that through the various treaties. What we saw was a journey which has been absolutely accelerated now with the war in Ukraine. All of the committee agendas are turned over to a war agenda. So, yeah, I mean, I suppose what I'm saying is the process was there. This has allowed it to accelerate. It's lunacy beyond your wildest dreams. It is utter lunacy. Whatever about any idea of the European Union having some sort of strategic autonomy in the Trump years, it's completely gone now. The European Union is a vassal state of US empire, even though its own interests are being decimated by taking this path. It's lunacy on steroids. I can't actually get over it.
Talk about aggressiveness and war. And I think that the other thing I've seen in this is that, and I think this is something that perhaps European leaders don't quite understand, is that the result is that Europe's global influence is actually declining. You can see this in the way in which various countries around the world are now responding to the language that they hear from Europe and from the European leadership. And specifically over the Ukraine war, they're starting to distance themselves because they don't see solutions coming from the European Union to this crisis.
I suppose we have one of the weakest leaderships at both EU level in von der Leyen, Borrell, Charles Michel. These are incredibly weak politicians who actually failed in leadership roles in their own countries, and now they're heading up these European institutions. They're just getting caught up now in this increasing Russophobia and war jingoism, and they just can't let go. And one of the reasons why they can't is that they are enabled and empowered by a complicit media, and that's possible because there is such a distance between them and the citizens, so they're not getting to meet the citizens and hear them, and yet the media is telling them they're doing everything right, and politicians love that. The original motion on the war, there were 13 of us who voted against that, and we were viciously targeted at that time. But even at that time, I remember an MEP from Bulgaria coming up to me, and that would be from the Social Democrat group, the second biggest group in the parliament, saying, look, I agree with everything that you've done, and I wished I could have voted like that, but I couldn't. We would just be killed in the media, and we're not allowed to do that. Then you have the absolute, I mean, the German Greens are like the biggest warmongers in the place. They'd be absolutely bad. The Polish across the board don't seem to want the war to stop, can't get enough of it. The Baltic states are absolutely, and it seems to me that they're the ones setting the agenda. They are the ones setting the shots. And, you know, it's this disgusting narrative that we're in a battle of authoritarianism against democracy. But some of the measures being brought in the member states are utterly frightening in terms of rewriting history and the whole role of World War II.
When you object to sending more weapons or advocate for negotiations, it's always the same knee-jerk reaction. It's not countering your argument. It's always, you know, well, now you're carrying water for Putin.
Obviously, the slogan goes, truth is the first casualty of war. And that is true. If you even take the Iraq war, and there was loads of disinformation, and there was loads of jingoism at that time, weapons of mass destruction and all that. But the difference was you could articulate an anti-war position. It mightn't have been the dominant in the mainstream media, but every article and every program featured an anti-war argument that was engaged with. So we got into the nitty-gritty. Well, is it war for oil? What's the story here? Now you don't engage with the political argument. You just say Putin puppet, and that's enough. Anybody who calls for peace, and there's no analysis or digging or space for critical thinking. Now that's given rise to a huge crisis in the minds of ordinary people. The space for critical and rational debate is shrinking, and it's getting worse now, big time. They are doing fact-checking, but it's not actually fact-checking at all. Just if you have a different view, that's it, you're gone. They are now introducing in the Parliament, they're trying to criminalise and sanction people in Europe for disinformation and foreign interference without any legal definition of what that is. This is really frightening, the direction in which this is going.
Yeah, the EU has a fact-checking mechanism where the ones who argue that we in the West backed a coup in Ukraine in 2014 as the start of this conflict, that this is, the fact checkers pointed out that this is fake news. It was a democratic revolution. But this is not checking facts, this is checking narrative.
The big groups dominating the debates, they're the ones who decide who would present to a committee. The money is coming from big industry, from big pharma, from big agri. There are 60,000 official lobbyists in Brussels. 60,000 people officially now on the register lobbying the EU institutions. That is absolutely massive. This is kind of hidden in full public view because we don't have a media which analyses this and joins the dots, because they've been bought and paid for as well. And as you say, anybody who questions that, it's not fact checked, it's the narrative is spun, and that's enough. So yeah, they're out there and they are everywhere.
Now, the main rhetoric I've seen from the EU Parliament has been that, you know, peace depends on Russia being perpetually weakened, or Russia must even be humiliated. You know, I guess all this venting the anger feels good, but it doesn't. It seems to go against the whole logic of what Macron and Angela Merkel were arguing for, because they were, at least to some extent, pointing out that we can't have peace in Europe if we deny security to Russia as well. I was just wondering, is this whole discussion in Europe gone with the departure of Angela Merkel, or is still or someone carrying this idea?
I think it's definitely it's bleak, like it's mental, because that is the only way to secure peace in Europe, is to include everybody, including Russia, in that. But they're doing everything they can to accelerate the tensions and to cause the divisions and shrink the space for where diplomacy might come into being. It's very troubling. I think the biggest problem is that the institutions have been captured by the lobbyists now, and big business and big finance. We saw there are questions around big pharma in terms of how they handled the Pfizer contracts and so on, which involve even Ursula von der Leyen. We've big agri dictating the policy now in terms of the environment, and obviously the military-industrial complex with more money than everybody. They are filtering in everywhere. The rest of the world is looking on. And you see the other side of the war, which again is that we've opened up a whole new balance of power in world relations. It's only really Europe that's hanging to the US's coattails in its death agony, because it is the decline of US empire that we're witnessing here. And while the rest of the world have enough cop on to know and try and develop other alliances, Europe is saying, no, these are our like-minded partners now. We don't mind that they charge us 4 times the amount for LNG than they pay their own citizens. We don't mind now if they protect their own industry at our expense. We don't mind if they spy on our leaders' data, because they are our like-minded partners. But it's those Russians and Chinese, they're the bad guys. That's actually enough for a lot. But yeah, the rest of the world can't believe it. We've gone to the US, to Georgia, to Pakistan, to Iraq, and in every one of those countries, people have spotted us and said they follow our work and agree with what we're saying. That has to give us all hope for the future, that it is the ordinary people who are grappling for a way to find out, and maybe through alternative discussions like this and through social media, people can begin to find a way of negotiating out of this madness. But it's not going to be easy, and I don't think it's going to be quick, but we have no choice but to try.